But I don't think it's helpful for people to jump in, particularly foreign heads of state, to say, this is what, he lived for my cause or whatever. That's disgusting, actually. Don't do that.
Okay, so that is a clear and unmistakable dig at Netanyahu.
Oh, yeah.
And he's talking to the vice president here. And he doesn't really let up. Speaking of Tucker Carlson, this video just came across the wire today. So today, JD Vance sat in the host chair for a Charlie Kirk show, and they had on, rotating sort of guests who knew Charlie well, and Tucker's obviously one of them. And here, Tucker Carlson went on to say, it did worry me. Some of the people who send money to Turning Point, his donors, were very high on him, so tough on him that I could feel it. I talked to him a lot in the last few months, and he was under enormous pressure. He never bent. Tucker also in this clip calls out, not explicitly by name, but everybody knows who he's talking about, Bibi Netanyahu, for trying to claim Charlie Kirk's legacy for himself in the immediate aftermath of his death. You saw Netanyahu tweet repeatedly in the minutes, both leading up to and then after the confirmation that he had passed. And so here's Tucker calling out Bibi to the vice president's face. I have to say, this was pretty ballsy. Tucker strikes me as a guy who's pretty aware of the conversations that are going on in the space. And he does not exactly shy away from what a lot of people are thinking. Let's take a look.
Good faith, you're on his team.
That is exactly right. And good faith is the measure. And I have to say, I think now is exactly the wrong time to appropriate the memory of someone and the emotion that comes with that, the really intense emotion that all of us feel at his murder, and use it for your own parochial ends. Like, he stood for this, and I think the reason that Charlie was able to bridge the gap, particularly in foreign policy, is because he had, for example, genuine affection for Israel, which he expressed to me in private many, many times. Like, I love Israel. I don't think we should have another forever war, regime change war against Iran. And I think that made complete sense to me. I sort of agree with that, actually. And so it allowed both sides to talk to him because they felt like, this person doesn't hate me. It doesn't need to get existential. It's not about disliking me or some weird bigotry. But I don't think it's helpful for people to jump in, particularly foreign heads of state, to say, this is what, he lived for my cause or whatever. That's disgusting, actually. Don't do that. Okay,
so that is a clear and unmistakable dig at Netanyahu.
Oh, yeah.
And he's talking to the vice president here. And he doesn't really let up.
Everybody off. You don't help your own cause by doing that. And it's also literally untrue. So I just hope that we can continue in, I'm not exaggerating, the spirit that he operated in, which is one of love for other people, including people we disagree with, and don't make it, as small bore as that. That doesn't help.
Yeah, so one of the issues, Tucker, and I agree with you, that he would express disagreements with the administration on, there are two that jump out, is one, Charlie was a hardliner on immigration. He wanted us to control our borders as much as possible. Yes. He wanted us to ramp up the deportations. I remember having conversations with Charlie. Pressure.
Okay, that flash was, I skipped ahead. They go on about immigration for about a minute, which is just not relevant to this clip. So for time purposes, we skipped ahead to where he now talks about the 12-day war between Israel and Iran.
As a friend, pressure as somebody who cares deeply about the issue. And that's true also, I know we have about 90 seconds left, but that's true about foreign policy. Like, I remember Charlie calling me and saying, I'm really worried. And this is back in the summer when the Iran strikes were sort of first being contemplated. He said, I'm really worried this is going to become another regime change war in the Middle East that we get trapped in. And I said, Charlie, first of all, have some faith here. The President of the United States is not a believer in perpetual war. He knows the mistakes of Iraq and Afghanistan. He doesn't want to repeat them. But Charlie was very clear that he could support Israel. And by the way, he did eventually support the strikes on the nuclear facility while simultaneously saying, no more. This can't become a bigger thing. This can't become a broader thing. And again, I think he modeled a really good way of applying pressure, of disagreeing when you do disagree, but also recognizing that so long as you're operating in good faith, we're all part of the team. And that's something I'm going to try to take from Charlie's legacy, is not that we're always right, not that we can't take criticism, but that we all should try to work together.
It did.
All right. Now, Tucker does not end there. He goes on.
Worry me, because I think your description is perfect. He was one of the very few who took that message and stood by it. I mean, right to the very end. This cannot get bigger. We don't want another regime change war. But man, some of the people who send money to Turning Point, his donors, were very tough on him. So tough on him that I could feel it. You know, I talked to him a lot in the last few months, and he was under enormous pressure. He never bent. He never became bitter.
He kept his integrity to the very end.
To the very end. And I just think it's important to say that because it's true.
Absolutely.
Okay, now once again, you know, it's just hard to imagine that Tucker is not aware of the conversations that are taking place right now about people and their suspicions, I think well-founded suspicions, and skepticism about what we're being told about this event. To go there the first time and call out Netanyahu for trying to basically claim Charlie Kirk's legacy for himself, more or less, which is what he said. Not in as many words, but that was the thrust of what he was saying. And then to go back and make the point, again, right to Vance's face, which I think I got to give it up to Tucker. It's a fairly ballsy thing to say right to the vice president's face. Hey, you know, I know he was under a lot of pressure from a lot of people who were giving him money. And that's, you know, Tucker saying it, but we've seen that reported. Multiple outlets, Max Blumenthal and Anya Parampil, our friends at the Gray Zone, they just put out a piece saying exactly that he was offered a bunch of money and turned down a bunch of money. We just heard the rabbi say what pressure he was under, and you know, Russ, you know, got into this in a previous segment, but I do think it is important to note when we're talking about Charlie Kirk, we're not just talking about another podcaster or another influencer. He was obviously very famous and very influential as a media person, but beyond being a media person, Charlie Kirk had built out a legitimate and formidable political infrastructure. I mean, I recall, you know, reading the tweets the day he died and a couple days after about so many people when they recalled having first met Charlie Kirk, remember thinking to themselves, this kid is going to be head of the RNC one day. This kid is going to be president one day. And, you know, this kind of validates that, because if you look here, Student Movement for Freedom on over 3,500 campuses, you know, when Charlie Kirk is old enough to perhaps run for president, he was, of course, only 31. All of these hubs become campaign machines.
Right.
I mean, that right there is a hell of a ground game, and he was just getting started. So it is really, I don't think, possible to overstate the influence that he had in the moment and the amount of potential influence he would accrue in the coming years. And so when there's that kind of pressure being applied to someone with this influence and this machinery, you know, it's one thing to be a star, it's another thing to have a machine built out. You know, politics is about blocking and tackling at the end of the day, and they did plenty of that. I mean, look at that ground game. That's what makes this very suspicious to me, is that this guy really was, I mean, you could really make a very strong case, in my opinion, that he was the future of the conservative movement. This is not just some podcaster who does good numbers on the charts. This was much, much bigger than that. He really, I think, transcended that, which is why, yeah, like, this just stinks. I'm sorry. Like, we can't make any accusations, but it stinks. Max Blumenthal today just came out with an article. Billionaire Bill Ackman convened stormy Israel intervention with Charlie Kirk. Sources say that just came out right before we went on the air. So I don't have that article to read. And then since we went on the air, Candace Owens has apparently corroborated this reporting. She is apparently saying that, yes, he had a contentious meeting with Bill Ackman over the summer about Israel. So this just looks horrible. And it looks worse and worse with everything we learn. I mean, that's all we can say for now, but it looks really bad. It looks really, really bad.
Yeah, if you look at the conversation around this, it's pretty revealing, because the libs became a party of hall monitors and Tracy Flicks, the character from Election. they don't get into the kinds of systemic questioning of narratives that a lot of people who identify as conservative or right wing will. They only want to litigate whether he was Republican or not. That is all they want to talk about. This kind of talk about the pressure he was under from the Israel lobby, even though the preponderance of pro-Palestine activists align with the Democratic Party, they won't go there, man. It's too much of a challenge to the entire institutional infrastructure, the whole media. Like they just won't. Even now, even with this particular thing where you would think they don't really have a dog in that fight to hold up media and institutions, it's the types of people who ideologically end up in that lane are just the least interesting, most melbatose, most conformist, least imaginative people in society. It's amazing, man. Like I haven't seen anyone on that side talking about that. As we cover the debate around who's responsible and what this means, it's entirely a conservative on conservative conversation. It's all like the meat of this conversation is almost entirely there. And you do have people like Matt Walsh or Benny in the Closet who want to do the work of seizing this opportunity to drum up an enormous assault on civil liberties and to get people to think they like that. But again, that's within the conservative world that you're really having this debate. I do think anyone that you see right now who's screaming about this is left trans people ideology, who's screaming that, you know right now if that's what they're pushing, they're bought or they are accelerationist and see an opportunity here to collapse the state in order to build it into what they believe the ideal state would be. They're taking advantage of the emotions of the moment they want civil war. Because civil war collapses the state. And if the state collapses, then they can build their vision of the new utopia.
Well, I would just say regarding the whole left on right, right on left, especially as it pertains to Israel, not in a way, I think I could say this definitively. The anti-Israel right at this point is, I think, a much bigger threat to the status quo than the anti-Israel left, partly because the right has power and the left doesn't.
Yeah.
And also because the left, even as defined, narrowly within the system as the Democratic Party. I mean, if you look at a poll of Democratic voters, they are now overwhelmingly pro-Palestine.
Yeah.
Whereas the Republican Party is still, majority pro-Israel. I forget what the exact split is. It's not as big as it was a few years ago, but it's still true that the Republican constituency is largely pro-Israel. That makes the dissenters in the Republican Party, I think, a bigger threat to the status quo now than the pro-Palestine left, because first of all, look, if we're talking about the influence that Israel exerts on the political process, both legal and otherwise, shall we say, it's going to be very hard for a Democrat to win the presidency, because look at that needle they're going to have to thread. Their base is almost entirely pro-Palestine. They take a pro-Palestine stance. Are they allowed to win? I mean, do we think they're allowed to win? So that means so the Democrats have a major problem there in terms of a path to the White House, which once again gives the anti-Israel right potentially a tremendous amount of influence.
It's true. Yeah.
Now Charlie Kirk was not there yet. I don't even know if he was close to there yet, but the more we find out about, the last 6 months of his life, the more we have reason to believe he may have been on his way. And that's what makes this really stink.
Well, the way that they describe what was happening with him behind the scenes, the more of this is coming out. It really reminds me of that John Kiriakou interview that we played, where he describes how people who start out being friendly to Israel end up hating Israel because of the way it treats even its friends.
Right. Yeah. And just to be clear before we end the clip, by stink, I mean, that's what makes it suspicious. It's obviously terrible that he was killed either way. That's not what I mean. It's terrible that he was killed either way. But by stink, I mean, that makes this a suspicious case. Yep.
Come see me on tour in Louisville, Fort Wayne, Hermosa Beach, Sacramento, San Francisco. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.